Hello everyone, my name is Garrett Summer. You all may know me as the Management Coordinator at Cacti Incorporated. And today I prepared you all a little presentation going over some business communications. Recently our head director John gave me some time off and allowed the funding for me to be enrolled into a business communications class through FRCC. And while I went through that class, I wrote a business report for all you guys that I emailed all you team leads. This is primarily going out to all you team leads, going more in depth to the same things I took away from that course. But I'm also making this presentation here going out to everybody, not only just the team leads, but some of the other employees, just so they can grasp some information a little bit better, so we can kind of improve how we do things here at Cacti and how we can improve our messaging and communications especially. So I'm going to go begin and go over a few things with you guys. So to start, these are some of the primary focuses that I took away from this class. Now the first one is communication skills, as you can see. Now this one is kind of a broad term. A lot of these items here below this all kind of follow communication skills in some way. So that is just kind of one big overall thing I took away. But one of the first things that this is primarily going out to the team leads that we'll get into here in the next slide was it went over some job finding and hiring process information that is going to be great to go over with you guys. It also went into some business messages, different types of business messages and how they can be used more effectively. And then it went into report functions and organizational strategies. Now reports are business messages, and it went into how to make effective reports and what they consist of. It also went through some effective media choices. I'm going to go over that to let you guys know what media to use in certain situations. And then the big one at the end that I'm going to touch on is channels of communication, and we'll get into that a little later. So beginning, this goes out to all you team leads because this primarily affects you. Some important components of the hiring process, since you guys are the ones going through that, are finding new employees for us here at Cacti. It went over, the various components like the resume, the cover letter, and the online employment-oriented services, aka LinkedIn is kind of the primary one there. So when it went over resumes, one of the main things it touched on was covering all the information. So when we get something like that from a future employee or someone interested or an applicant, it's important. I want you guys to primarily look at their previous experience and their references in particular. The course put a big emphasis on references, as it's very important to kind of see where those applicants were before and how they performed in their previous jobs. And obviously we want to make sure that we're getting good applicants in because we want good coworkers here at Cacti Incorporated. It also went over how to make a good cover letter. This is just something simple that I want you guys to go over. Make sure it's professional, make sure it's void of grammatical errors and anything like that. If it has any of those, that's a big red flag we need to look at. It's a big thing for me to look at too for hiring new team leads, so one thing for you guys to pay attention to as well. And then of course the online employment oriented services like LinkedIn was emphasized heavily. When I went through the course, we actually made like a little profile to kind of practice and see how it worked primarily. So what LinkedIn kind of allows you to do is people can go on there and then communicate with each other, and you can kind of find jobs on LinkedIn in a way. You make your own profile, people can view you, hirers can view you. It's a very good source that I didn't really use much before, that I definitely want to pass on to you guys because it's a very good source to get new applicants in and see what they're capable of and what they're qualified for. So going over to job searching, these are just simple things that went over. I'm not going to touch on this too much. Indeed's a very popular one. Most of you team leads already know about that. LinkedIn, as I said, and then just references are things people use as well. So we're going to move on to the next slide here. So the next big takeaway I took away from this course that I want you guys to go over was business messages. Now there's 4 main business messages that I noticed that I went over, and obviously most of you know that it's verbal, nonverbal, written, and visual business messages. Now these are all very self-explanatory. Verbal is speaking, whether it be in person, over the phone, anything like that. Nonverbal, this is kind of something I wanted to point out. Nonverbal communication, for you that don't know, for like instance, if you're in a meeting or there's a presentation going on, things like giving visual cues to that person. It's a little different from the visual. To show interest and engagement in the presentation is very useful. It went over a lot of those things. So when you guys are in board meetings and things like that, I want you guys to be paying attention to that, just so we can have more effective meetings. And then written, it's obviously letters, emails, invoices, well, not invoices, I apologize. Things like that, and like we went through before on cover letters, grammatical errors and professionalism is very important when it comes to those kinds of documents. And then visual kind of goes towards the nonverbal thing, but not really. Things like presentations are a great form of messages. Anything like that, it went over that. So we're going to move on to the next one here. Now, one of the primary written messages that it went over in the course was reports. There was many chapters relating to reports. We wrote a report as a practice in the course just to kind of get a better idea of how they work. So they kind of consist of kind of four main parts that I listed right here. They primarily analyze or evaluate a particular issue or a set of circumstances. They can also go into financial operations, and their primary focus with all three of those things is to communicate relevant information effectively. Now, of course, financial operations and circumstances are important information that needs to be relayed to our employees. So it's important when going through reports that we make them clear and concise. You all know how to do those, but like I said before, make them professional. And then we're going to get into some communication tones here at the end that I'm going to go over that can benefit these here. So effective media choices was one thing that was also touched on in the course. It went over letters, reports, invoices, and professional documents. Now, letters, of course, as you all know, can be paper written or sent over email. Those are very effective going through. They can go to many people, like that business report I sent out to all you guys. I sent it out to everybody, so it's available for everyone. Reports, like we just went over, they go over relevant information. Invoices are also used pretty heavily, and then professional documents are also used. It's pretty similar to letters and reports. It's kind of some repetitive information here, but these are just kind of the primary things I want you guys to focus on when choosing effective media choices. There's a whole ton of them, but these are kind of the four that I want you guys to focus on that I took away that were the most important from the course. So lastly, what the big thing I was talking about earlier is channels of communication. And when there was a couple chapters in our business communications class that went over this, and this carried on, and this carries on in our company today, as some of you may know. This is a very kind of important thing in just overall communication for any kind of information that we're relaying. Now, there's two main types that I'm going to go over here. Now, this can be subdivided into a lot of other categories, but the first one is going to be formal communication. Now, formal communication, it can vary a little bit, but normally it's less personal. There's no first person in this type of communication, and it's primarily used for professional or academic purposes. This can be for changes in our company that aren't, they're not crazy, they're not really negatively affecting anybody. They can, but this just kind of gets the point across to everybody. No first person, obviously, not personal. It just gives the person the information, what's changing in the company, whether it be, pay benefits, new policies coming in, things raising in costs, anything like that. The formal communication is a very good thing to use for that. Now, moving on, informal communication is kind of the opposite of that. It's way more casual and it can flow freely. Now, what that means is it can start out one way, and I'll give an example here in a minute, and then it can end in a completely different area, and this generally can mean it's kind of personal. So informal communication, generally speaking, can be used for negative information, bad news, anything like that. Oftentimes you'll see informal communication start off kind of casual, personal, kind of slow getting to the point, and then towards the end, you can kind of get into the bad news. It's really apologetic. I think so, like any bad news or anything like that, this is commonly used for kind of big changes, like in wages or laying people off, anything like that. This is particularly big information for you team leads. So this is just kind of something I wanted to relay to you guys because it went over heavily in the business communications course that I found very important. And I want you guys to pay attention to this because formal and informal have two very different uses, as I just explained, and you need to be sure to use those in the correct situation and scenario. So these are just some of the things that I wanted to go over from you guys that I took away from this class. Thanks to John, our head director, for letting me go through that opportunity. Please take a look at our the business report I sent via email to you guys, and I really appreciate you guys looking at this presentation here. Of course, this went out to all the team leads, and I hope a lot of you other employees, no matter what department you're in here at Cacti Incorporated, can take something away from this. Communication is very important to us, and I hope you can all benefit and learn something from this presentation. So thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing what we can do in the next year or so. So thank you.